Welcome to VEDA, Vlog Every Day in August, Day 26. Talk about someone that you admire. I will talk about two people that I admire, and there's a relation between those people and myself. The first one is being my grandfather. This is my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, my dad's dad, Victor Hugo Holitz. He was the youngest of 4 children. Sylvia, Irma, Francis, and him. And his mom and dad came over from Bohemia, which is like the western, between Germany and Czech Republic, in that area there. They spoke Bohemian. He spoke Bohemian and English. He would sit in his chair, when I remember him when I was little, he'd sit in his chair and he'd drink some Kümmel, which was an alcoholic version of caraway seeds. Yes, my love for caraway. My grandpa was a poor kid. The immigrants were all in the poorer neighborhoods, where you had a little chicken coop in the backyard and you kept a couple chickens and you had eggs, and then periodically you had chicken for dinner. But they were poor. He grew up poor, and he didn't want to be poor. So by the time he was a young man, he enlisted in the army, but he had structural problems, bone and feet and legs, and he physically couldn't go to war. So he worked the mail train between cities and would deliver mail, military mail and regular mail. He was in charge of it on the train, and every time they go through Ely, Iowa, my grandma worked at a bank out there in Ely, and she knew when the train went by, and people like to watch the train go by. Well, he saw her and she saw him, and they started waving to each other, and pretty soon that's how they met. But anyway, my grandfather grew up very poor. When he got out of the army, what was there to do? Well, he went to business school, took some business classes, and he had saved up some money. He was very frugal, because when you're poor, you learn how to save. He took that money and he bought a little business. He had a potato chip factory, a small one, in Cedar Rapids. It was called Crispy Chips. They were a nickel a bag. And he basically made chips for institutions like schools and hospitals and places like that, businesses. And they delivered boxes and boxes of these chips. And in the winter and at Christmas time, they would also make peanut brittle and fudge. My grandpa used to make fudge at home. He retired early, at 55 or something. So he and my grandma, she worked at an insurance company. They'd go to Florida for a month or something in the winter. But when he was at home, in the basement, he had a workbench. And he was always creating something. He was always goofing around and messing with stuff. And he'd paint pictures with house paint. And he'd use unorthodox methods of painting. Whatever he could find. A stick, his finger, whatever, a Q-tip. He would paint paintings. So I guess creativity and artistic ability run in my family. And I love the guy dearly. He taught me that when it was daylight on this side of the earth, it was dark on the other side, because he had a globe hanging from a spring in the basement over the workbench. And I used to love looking at that thing. And I made some comment about children in China or something, and well, they should be doing this now, and he said no, they're sleeping. And I thought, what? So he had me hold a flashlight, and he revolved the globe around, and he said, here's the daytime over here, but back here it's dark. And I thought, oh. So I did learn a lot from him, a lot of scientific stuff, centrifugal force. He had this bucket of water, and he'd say, I can spin this bucket around without spilling any. And my brother and I stood there with our mouths open and like, really? And he did. It was basically centrifugal force held the water in the bucket as he swung it around. But he was very wise too. I mean, he told me something that I still remember. Did I heed the advice? No, but I should have. He says, don't let people take advantage of you. He also taught me how to look for money as you're walking along, pick up pennies, and I do. I pick up a penny. How to look for loose change, how to save money, how to make things from nothing, food or items, and I think he's one of my biggest influences in my life, my grandpa. My other biggest influence, and this is a picture when he was a lot older, is my father, Victor Pelholik. Pell was his grandma's maiden name. And that's usually how people name their kids, with a relative's name for a middle name. Dad was very creative as well. He grew up an only child, and he joined ROTC, which is a kind of a youth, like an army, but ROTC, you go through the army training and everything, and you get schooling, which he was a little too old to have fought in World War II and not quite old enough to do the Korean War. I mean, he was right in between. So he went to college and he took engineering, electronic engineering. So he was an electronic engineer. He was a very smart guy. He taught me some ways to do math in my head that I would do at school, and the teacher would say, how'd you do that? You got to show your work. And I thought, I can't show my work. I know the answer, but I don't know how I got it exactly. So Dad was very inventive. He worked for Collins Radio Company, and Collins invented or worked on the communication system of the Apollo Gemini mission for space and all that. He worked on the console that was a communication console. He also invented a resistor, a certain type of resistor that's, I don't remember what it's called exactly, but it's in the book. But because he was working for Collins Radio, when you invent something, you sign a waiver that if you invent something, the company can claim it. So he had a workbench in the basement also, and he spent a lot of time down there. Instead of like a guy working on a car in a garage, he was in the basement. He was a nerd supreme, so am I, and I don't care. He was a Trekkie, Star Trek. He believed in alien life form, but he never really said anything. But there's a lot of books, and he was always interested in things, the unknown. He taught me how to do, like I said, math in a different way than we were being taught at school. Personally, I thought it was a better way, the one he taught me. And he would make things. He made like a little stoplight out of a cookie tin and a flashlight and a shoebox, so that we could play, you know, like we were driving cars up and down the driveway. The little stoplight would work. And he had shortwave radio in the basement, which I used to like to sit down there and listen to shortwave music from other countries and people from other countries. He worked for the Signal Corps in the Army, so he had some government stuff, newsletter that he'd print. We had a mimeograph machine, we had a teletype, we had all kinds of really awesome, cool, gadgety stuff. He also was trying to invent a machine that, like when you wait at the airport between flights, you know, you get bored. In those days, there was no cell phone. There wasn't much to occupy your time except talking to someone or reading a book. So he invented this game that was like questions and answers, kind of like a computer quiz, right? But it was all put on this punch tape, and it was so awesome. He never got around to perfecting it. Too bad, Dad. Too bad. Maybe I can invent something. I don't know. But he played the piano, and he taught me how to play the piano at the very beginning. So I miss you, Dad. I wish you were around, because there are a lot of grown-up questions that you don't think of asking when you're a kid. Like, how do you do this, or how do you know when this is right or that is right? And how you feel about that. I don't know what he'd think about all the stuff going on in the world. He'd probably shake his head and cry later. That's kind of what I do. But my grandfather and my dad were the biggest influences in my life, and I admire them. My grandpa brought himself up from nothing, and my father, he improved on whatever situation he had. He would improve on it. And he never swore. He always had a good, if he didn't have anything nice to say, he just wouldn't say it, or he'd, you could tell on his face that he didn't like it. But he never was negative. He felt depressed and negative inside. I'm sure he did. But I guess when you're really, really smart, you can see what's going on around you. And yeah, you can get depressed because other people just don't get it. Yeah, I've talked long enough. Upward and onward.